Well, good morning, darlings and distinguished gents. Emily here, ready to sprinkle a little sparkle over your day with the juiciest scoop from the ever-charming world of Witworks. I hope you're all basking in the glow of positivity this fine morning. Now, let's chat about today's main attraction, courtesy of the marvelous minds over at Gizmo League. These fabulous folks are basically the Justice League of gadgets and gaming goodies. They've got the coolest, most futuristic toys you could dream of, like straight out of a sci-fi flick. And let's show them a little love, because they're the reason we're all gathered here today. Round of applause, please. And don't forget to pop over to www.gizmoleague.com after the show for your fill of awesome finds. Now, without further ado, let's dive into today's most enchanting tale, shall we? Top 10 Double Agents: The Irony of Trust in the 20th Century. Introduction. When it comes to espionage, trust is more of a suggestion than a rule. The 20th century was full of spies playing both sides, often leaving their governments, allies, and sometimes even themselves confused. These double agents were masters of deception, flipping loyalties faster than you can say classified. Here's a look at the top 10 double agents who made secrecy their specialty and irony their calling card. 1. Kim Philby. Kim Philby was the kind of guy who could shake your hand with a friendly smile while slipping your wallet to his other employer. The poster child for betrayal might sound dramatic, but it honestly doesn't do him justice. Here was a man whose entire career in British intelligence was essentially an elaborate piece of performance art for the Soviet Union. Philby wasn't just any double agent. He was a charming, cunning, high-ranking member of British intelligence with friends in high places who trusted him implicitly. Meanwhile, he was waltzing around, handing British secrets over to the KGB like they were party favors. To say he was living a double life is putting it mildly. Picture a Russian nesting doll of deception. Every time you thought you knew what Kim Philby was about, another layer came off to reveal yet another level of betrayal. He had everyone fooled: friends, family, colleagues. Even the people he was selling out for years were utterly oblivious. The very qualities that made him the true English gentleman, his sophistication, his charm, his smooth-talking nature, were also what made him the perfect spy. The irony here is about as thick as a spy novel plot twist, because he played the part of the English gentleman so well, nobody would have guessed he was one of the most successful double agents of the 20th century. He didn't just break British intelligence, he blindsided it. For years, Philby would casually stroll into work, swap secrets like he was trading baseball cards, and then return to his cover story without a hitch. It was as if he was starring in a private, one-man espionage drama where every performance kept the audience, his unsuspecting colleagues, wrapped around his finger. People couldn't help but like him. Friends would have probably described him as loyal, dependable, and respectable. And all the while, he was plotting against the very country that gave him his high rank. In the end, Philby's career unraveled with all the drama of a soap opera finale. He defected to the Soviet Union, leaving behind a trail of bewildered colleagues and a deeply betrayed British government. The very things that helped him go undetected, his charm, his status, his true English facade, only served to twist the knife in deeper when the truth came out. As it turned out, being an English gentleman didn't just make him an effective spy, it made him a legendary traitor, too. And that, ironically, might just be what made him perfect for the job in the first place. 2. Aldrich Ames. Aldrich Ames was basically the poster child for don't get too greedy. As a CIA officer, he lived a double life, where one side served his country, and the other side was a one-man clearance sale of American secrets to the Soviet Union. And not only did he sell information, he practically auctioned it off, making him one of the most, let's say, financially savvy double agents of all time. Unlike most government employees struggling to pay rent, Ames was out here raking in millions by trading classified info, all in cold, hard cash. Now, in theory, he could have kept a low profile, tucked his cash away in offshore accounts, and continued living a modest life, blending in with his fellow CIA colleagues. But Ames? Oh no. He had a little more ambition and a lot less subtlety. Instead of playing it cool, he went on a full-blown shopping spree. This wasn't a case of treat yourself with the occasional splurge. It was more like, why not treat myself to everything? He bought luxury cars, designer clothes, a flashy house, and everything that screamed, "Look at me! I am living way beyond my government salary." Unsurprisingly, the folks at the CIA began noticing Ames's lifestyle upgrade and thought, hold on, isn't this guy on the same paycheck as the rest of us? All those expensive tastes and questionable purchases ended up blowing his cover. The spy who thought he was a financial genius didn't account for the red flags he was raising with each new luxury buy. Eventually, his bosses got suspicious and started investigating. And, as it turns out, living like a billionaire while on a government paycheck doesn't exactly scream innocent. So, after almost a decade of high-rolling spy life, Ames was arrested in 1994. The irony here? If he'd just stuck with his regular CIA income, avoided the Ferraris and champagne, he might have flown under the radar indefinitely. He had the perfect gig, after all. High salary, no taxes, not legally anyway, and plenty of international travel perks. But that wasn't enough. He had to have the penthouse and the Rolex to match, and in the end, it was his inability to resist luxury that brought him down. Today, Ames is serving a life sentence with no possibility of parole. A far cry from the glitzy life he was chasing. If there's a lesson here, it's that if you're going to betray your country, maybe don't shop like you won the lottery overnight. Or, just avoid the whole double agent thing altogether. 3. Mata Hari. Mata Hari might just be the ultimate femme fatale. Picture this, a woman who started her career captivating audiences as an exotic dancer, only to end up as one of history's most infamous spies. Born Margaretha Geertruida Zelle in the Netherlands, she reinvented herself as Mata Hari, a stage name that sounded just exotic enough to thrill the crowd, and apparently to catch the attention of military intelligence. Her performances were tantalizing, shrouded in mystery, and steeped in an Eastern mystique that was all the rage back then. But if you're expecting cloak and dagger espionage, Mata Hari's story has a bit more shimmer and a lot less substance than you might think. During World War I, she became known for mingling with officers and diplomats, enjoying the finer things in life. Think Paris hotels, champagne, and jewels. But as war tension built, France needed someone to blame for all the secrets spilling out, and Mata Hari, with her rumored dalliances with high-ranking officers, seemed just suspicious enough. In reality, her contributions to espionage may have been a little, let's say, underwhelming. Some historians argue she was more of a scapegoat than a super spy. Her actual spy work was apparently about as effective as a screen door on a submarine. She did allegedly pass along some information, but most accounts suggest she wasn't exactly rolling up government secrets in her silk stockings. Nevertheless, her reputation was her downfall. Her allure, her exotic dancer past, and her associations with powerful men made her an easy target. In 1917, France accused her of double-crossing them by spying for Germany, and the trial that followed was a public spectacle. They painted her as a sultry seductress who was tempting state secrets out of officers like she was handing out dance cards at a ball. The press had a field day, and France was all too eager to use her as a warning. Ultimately, she was sentenced to death and met her fate by firing squad, wearing a fur coat no less, because Mata Hari was going to face her end with style. Today, Mata Hari is a legend, embodying every Hollywood stereotype of the femme fatale spy who uses charm and mystery to work her way through the intelligence underworld. But the truth? She was likely just a dancer who got caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. wrapped up in a story that wasn't hers to begin with. And in the end, it was her reputation, not any military secrets, that turned out to be her most dangerous weapon. 4. Eddie Chapman. Eddie Chapman was no ordinary spy. He was a full-on character straight out of an action movie if that movie had been written by someone with a dark sense of humor. Originally a safecracker with a knack for trouble, Chapman managed to turn his criminal expertise into wartime currency during World War II. He had a gift for hopping between allegiances with the sort of casual ease most people reserve for switching lanes on the freeway. In fact, Chapman's shifting loyalties were so smooth and natural that he ended up as an incredibly effective double agent. He earned himself the catchy codename Agent Zigzag, fitting for a guy whose loyalty was about as straight as a curly fry. Chapman started off as a prisoner in Jersey in the Channel Islands, which were occupied by German forces. And while some prisoners might just sit and wait for their sentence to end, Chapman saw an opportunity. He offered his services to the Germans, convincing them he'd be a great asset as a spy. And here's the twist: the Germans actually fell for it. They trained him as a spy and parachuted him back into Britain to carry out sabotage. But in classic Chapman fashion, he landed on British soil, strolled up to MI5, and casually offered to spy on the Germans for the British instead. It's almost as if he was working on his own brand of wartime customer loyalty program. As Agent Zigzag, Chapman pulled off stunts that were, frankly, bizarrely impressive. He fed the Germans false information, set up fake sabotage efforts, and basically turned his spy work into a series of elaborate pranks. Somehow, despite his dubious background as a criminal, Chapman won over his British handlers. He had a charm that could probably sell sand in the desert, and it was this charm, combined with his audacious stunts, that made him a celebrated figure in Britain by the end of the war. Sure, he had a rap sheet longer than a novel, but what did that matter? He'd played a crucial role in duping the enemy. In the end, Chapman's life was a paradox. He was a hero to the British despite spending his pre-spy years cracking safes rather than saving lives. You'd think that kind of background would make him a questionable choice for a hero, but Chapman seemed to thrive on being the exception to every rule. So, hats off to Agent Zigzag, the double agent with a history as crooked as a switchback trail and the instincts of a true survivor. If nothing else, he had more lives than a cat with a gym membership. 5. Juan Pujol Garcia, Agent Garbo. Imagine a man so good at lying he could sell sand in the Sahara, only his buyers were the Nazis, and his product was pure nonsense. That's Juan Pujol Garcia, better known by his spy code name, Agent Garbo. This guy managed to pull off one of the greatest pranks of World War II, all while sitting right under the Nazis' noses. Garcia wasn't some shadowy super agent. He was an ordinary guy from Spain who, amazingly, decided he'd try his hand at espionage with the Allied forces. The funny thing? At first, both the British and Germans turned him down. Hard to believe now, right? But undeterred, Garcia essentially hired himself. With zero training or experience, he created a whole cast of imaginary agents and somehow convinced the Nazis that these fictional people were feeding him top-secret information. So, while the Nazis thought they had a whole network of spies reporting back, what they really had was Garcia sitting there with a pen and paper, inventing everything like he was writing a screenplay. And the best part? The Nazis adored him. They truly believed they had a dedicated, invaluable ally in Agent Garbo. He was awarded the Iron Cross, a prestigious German military honor, by Hitler's command itself. Not bad for a guy who, behind the scenes, was helping the Allies every step of the way. Garcia didn't just stop at pulling a few fast ones. He created a web of misinformation so effective it actually delayed the German response to the D-Day invasion. Thanks to Garcia's careful intel, Hitler kept his troops focused away from Normandy, buying the Allies crucial time to secure the beaches. After the war, you'd think the Nazis might have caught on to the fact that Agent Garbo was pulling their leg. Nope. They were still under the impression that he'd been one of their most loyal agents. Garcia retired to Venezuela and lived a quiet life, probably chuckling to himself every now and then about how he managed to con the most feared regime in the world without ever raising a gun or firing a shot. Agent Garbo was the real deal. He gave the Nazis a masterclass in the art of deception, and he did it with such style that they never even realized it. For a man who risked everything just to make sure he was on the right side of history, Garcia's story is proof that sometimes the pen truly is mightier than the sword, or, in this case, way mightier than a few clueless Nazis. 6. Robert Hansen. Robert Hansen's tale is one of those real-life spy stories so outrageous that it almost reads like a movie script. Picture this: a veteran FBI agent, a guy who was supposed to be one of the good guys, somehow ends up becoming one of the most damaging spies in U.S. history. This is the man who, by day, donned his FBI badge, sat through meetings about protecting national security, and then, by night, strolled right into the arms of the KGB with a file full of U.S. secrets. Talk about a double life! Now, you'd think someone as dedicated to his job as Hansen wouldn't be the type to go rogue, especially when he seemed so deeply rooted in traditional values. He was a devout Catholic who could probably recite the rosary faster than most, and he was a regular churchgoer. Yet, behind this facade of faith and duty, Hansen spent a jaw-dropping 22 years sharing classified information with America's adversaries. Imagine going from "for God and country" to "for God and, well, the KGB," without even blinking. Hansen's espionage wasn't exactly cheap gossip either. We're talking about highly classified information, American intelligence programs, the identities of undercover agents, even the structure of U.S. counterintelligence operations. His actions led to the exposure and deaths of several agents working on behalf of the United States, not to mention a breach in national security that took years to recover from. And what did he get in return? Cash, diamonds, and even a Rolex or two. You know, just the kind of stuff you'd imagine a secret agent in a midlife crisis would want. If there were an award for Hypocrite of the Decade, Hansen would be the reigning champ. After all, he sat through sermons about loyalty, honesty, and faith each week, while, ironically, pulling off one of the most notorious betrayals in American history. He may not have taken home an Academy Award for his performance, but Hansen's ability to lead this double life could rival any Hollywood blockbuster. In the end, he was caught in 2001 and sentenced to life in prison, where he traded his Rolex for prison overalls. He left behind a legacy that serves as a cautionary tale. Sometimes the biggest threats come from where you least expect. And if anyone ever writes a playbook for double-crossing while holding a straight face, they'll probably dedicate it to Robert Hansen. 7. George Blake. Alright, so let's talk about George Blake. Here's a guy who really went for the gold in the spy world. Not only was he a member of MI6, but he also had a serious thing for the Soviet Union. I mean, if you're going to do espionage, you might as well add a little flair, right? For most spies, the name of the game is cash, power, or at least a little personal gain on the side. But Blake? Oh no, he wasn't in it for the typical perks. Nope, our man George turned traitor out of sheer belief. He looked at the Soviet Union and thought, "These are my people." Blake's story begins in the smoke-filled rooms of Cold War intrigue. He was actually a pretty good MI6 agent, blending in, gathering intel, the whole bit. But something inside him was drawn to the Soviet cause, like a moth to a big red hammer and sickle flame. Now, usually when a spy crosses over to the other side, it's not because they're starry-eyed idealists. But Blake wasn't the type to be lured by the shiny material temptations that snagged many spies. Oh no, he wasn't about to sell secrets for a flashy car or a cushy retirement fund. Blake was a true believer, the rare kind who betrayed his country not for money, but for ideology. So, off he went, slipping British secrets to the KGB like they were love notes passed under the table in high school. To the Soviets, Blake was a gold mine, Thanks to his intel, they managed to undermine British intelligence operations in all sorts of ways, leaving MI6 to wonder how in the world their carefully laid plans kept going sideways. Eventually, Blake's double dealing came to light, and let's just say the British government was not amused. The scandal was enormous, partly because, as far as anyone could tell, he didn't make a penny off his betrayal. It was almost insulting in a way. Here was this MI6 insider, and instead of selling his country's secrets for a fortune, he did it because he wanted to help the Soviets. So, unsurprisingly, Blake got tossed into prison, landing a nice, cold cell to mull over his idealistic decisions. But the story doesn't end there. In classic spy drama fashion, Blake made a daring escape from prison, with a little help from some friends on the outside. He actually managed to flee to Moscow, where he was welcomed with open arms and given a hero's reception. George Blake may have started out as a British spy, but he ended his days in the Soviet Union, a true believer right to the end. 8. William Siebold. Let's talk about William Siebold, a guy who took loyalty and doing a job well to a whole new dizzying level. Picture this: Siebold, a German-American, was going about his life when the Nazis approached him with an opportunity to serve the fatherland as a spy in the United States. Now, for most people, this would be the plot twist where things start to go off the rails. But for Siebold, it was just the beginning of a double-agent career straight out of a spy thriller. So, Siebold goes back to the United States, and instead of slipping into the shadows, what does he do? He practically sprints over to the FBI and tells them everything, saying, "Guess what? The Nazis think I'm working for them, but actually, I'm all yours." That's right. He just laid it all out for the FBI, offered to work for them instead, and became a double agent. And thus began Siebold's undercover life, where he wasn't just pretending to be a spy. He was pretending to be a spy for the Nazis while actually spying on them. It's the kind of twist that would make even a seasoned novelist dizzy. Now, Siebold didn't just skate by as a double agent. He was wildly effective. Thanks to his work, the FBI uncovered one of the largest spy rings in American history, busting more than 30 Nazi agents who were secretly operating on U.S. soil. Imagine being in that network of agents, thinking you're all undercover and untouchable, only to find out the guy sharing information with you is actually spilling your secrets to the FBI. Talk about an awkward company meeting. Siebold's undercover work was nothing short of cinematic. He communicated with Nazi agents in cleverly orchestrated meetings and through secret radio messages, all while feeding the FBI every piece of intel he gathered. It was a classic case of playing both sides, but with one side totally in the dark. In fact, the Nazis were so convinced of Siebold's loyalty that they probably would have awarded him Employee of the Month if they'd known what was going on. Ironically, he was perhaps their best asset in America, but not in the way they thought. Thanks to Siebold, the FBI dismantled an entire network, leaving Nazi intelligence in America stunned and a bit embarrassed, to say the least. So, here's to William Siebold, a man who played the ultimate gotcha on Nazi intelligence, proving that sometimes the best spies are the ones who switch sides right under their employers' noses. 9. Oleg Penkovsky. Oleg Penkovsky's story is one of those Cold War tales that feels like it could be a Hollywood thriller, minus the happy ending. Picture this. Here's a Soviet colonel, trusted by his homeland, who suddenly starts passing top-secret information to the West. This wasn't just any gossip either. It was insider knowledge that the CIA and MI6 lapped up like kids on Christmas morning. Penkovsky knew about Soviet military strategies, missiles, and other juicy details that Western intelligence desperately wanted. And he handed it all over, willingly. He was like the James Bond of Moscow, only his gadgets were intel memos, not tricked-out Aston Martins. Now, Penkovsky wasn't just passing along intel on a whim. He saw himself as a kind of peacekeeper, or at least that's the story. He was no fan of how things were going in the Soviet Union. The Cold War tensions were so high, it was like a global standoff, just waiting for someone to make the wrong move. and Penkovsky seemed to think that sharing Soviet secrets with the West might actually help maintain some semblance of stability. He wasn't entirely wrong. His intel did indeed help the U.S. navigate one of the most precarious moments of the Cold War, the Cuban Missile Crisis. But being a double agent in the Cold War was about as safe as juggling hand grenades. You could get away with it for a while. Maybe even feel like a hero because, in a way, he was one. Penkovsky's work quite literally helped prevent nuclear disaster. But the kicker? He was a hero for two sides that absolutely could not stand each other. It's like rooting for both teams in the Super Bowl. Sooner or later, you're going to disappoint someone. Big time. Eventually, the KGB got wise to him. Penkovsky's little secret blew up in his face, and his life took a swift, sharp turn from international espionage to Soviet prison. He was captured, interrogated, and ultimately executed in 1963, marking a grim end for a man who had walked such a dangerous tightrope. And there's the ironic twist. He went down in history as a hero, but for opposing teams. To the West, he was a brave defector who risked it all for peace. To the Soviets, he was a traitor. Plain and simple. In the end, Penkovsky's story is a reminder of the risky, complicated web of loyalties and motives that characterized the Cold War era. He tried to play both sides in a game where neither side was interested in sharing a win. It's no surprise it didn't end well for him, but you have to admit, he left quite a mark on history. 10. Sidney Riley. Sidney Riley, a name that practically screams mystery man. Known as the Ace of Spies, Riley was one of those guys who made the spy world look both glamorous and absurdly risky at the same time. Picture James Bond, but with an accent you can't quite place and a background that nobody can fully pin down. British? Russian? A mix of both? Maybe even a touch of the fictional? No one really knew. But Riley was willing to work for anyone with a fat enough wallet, and he played his cards like a true gambler at the spy table, switching allegiances as smoothly as one might swap a tux for a trench coat. Riley's story is packed with so many wild escapades that if someone tried to pitch his biography as a Hollywood movie, it would probably get turned down for being too unrealistic. Yet, Riley was the real deal. He faked identities, charmed secrets out of socialites, and made narrow escapes that should have earned him a lifetime supply of close-call cigars. There was a certain flair to his methods. He wasn't just sneaking around in the shadows, he was doing it with style. This guy didn't just gather intelligence, he staged whole soap opera-level dramas to get the information he wanted, slipping into roles and disguises with such ease that it's a wonder he didn't walk around with a rotating rack of costumes. One of his most daring stunts was getting involved in a plot to overthrow the Bolshevik government, all while cozying up to their enemies and trying to rally support from Russian exiles. You'd think he'd be the type to quit while he was ahead, but Sidney didn't do ahead. He did all in, and this high-stakes maneuver eventually landed him in hot water. The Soviets caught wind of his antics, and they weren't exactly in a forgiving mood. So, after years of intrigue, betrayal, and frankly exhausting levels of drama, Riley's story ended on a somber note. He was captured and executed by the Soviets, leaving behind a legacy as one of the most audacious double agents of his time. While James Bond gets the glitz and glamour on the silver screen, Riley's life was more about dodging Soviet bullets than sipping shaken martinis. His real-life Bond story may have ended in tragedy, but Sidney Riley's audacious spirit, and let's be honest, his ability to bluff his way through just about anything, secured him a permanent spot in the Spy Hall of Fame. Conclusion: these double agents turned deception into a high-stakes game, crafting intricate webs of loyalty and betrayal. Their stories prove that in espionage, trust is as flimsy as a stage prop, easily shattered and often more illusion than reality. From moral dilemmas to colorful personalities, they shared the irony of being loyal in a profession built on treachery. While a few walked away with fame, fortune, or even a strange sense of redemption, others paid a heavier price. In the end, their legacies remain as a reminder that in the shadowy world of espionage, everyone's playing both sides, even if they pretend otherwise. And with that, my darling listeners, we wrap up today's little escapade. Here at Witwork Studios, we thrive thanks to the charm and loyalty of sharp, fabulous souls like you. Now, if you're in the mood for some VIP treatment, think unlimited access to our latest podcasts and the satisfaction of supporting our artistic ventures, why not take a stroll over to our Premium Subscribers Club? I know you're savvy, no map needed. But before you dash off to conquer the world with all this newfound brilliance, I must send a special shout-out to our lovely friends over at Gizmo League. These wonderful folks are the real MVPs, bringing this podcast to life and delivering tech magic straight to your ears. So, if a little gadget goodness sounds like your thing, head on over to www.gizmoleague.com and see what's brewing. Until we meet again, keep that curiosity sparkling and stay as fabulous as ever. Until next time, my lovelies.